They wanted drama, the kind that screams, the kind that begs for witnesses, the kind that leaves everyone feeling important in the wreckage. They wanted slammed doors, raised voices, shaking hands, and public scenes. What they never saw coming was the kind of ending that doesn't echo at all. What they received instead was a tragedy so quiet it took them months to understand they were standing in it. They expected tears as proof of damage. They expected chaos as proof of impact. They expected the audience to gather and choose sides. What they got was a disappearance so clean it felt unreal, as if the story simply forgot one of its main characters and kept moving forward without explanation. There is a special cruelty in being denied a final fight. Drama gives people the illusion of meaning. It tells them the destruction mattered. Tragedy does not ask for permission. It arrives, closes the door, and leaves no stage behind. They rehearsed your breakdown like it was their victory speech. They imagined the timing, the script, the moment where you would finally collapse into the version they wanted you to become. They mistook your silence for delay, never realizing it was the ending. You didn't give them scenes. You gave them absence. And absence is the one thing no manipulator knows how to control. They kept checking for reactions that never arrived. No late-night messages. No emotional spirals. No attempts at closure. Just time moving forward, as if nothing had happened, and that unnerved them more than any confrontation ever could. They built their identity around being the storm in someone else's life. What shattered them was discovering they were no longer the weather. You learned how to walk through without getting wet. They told themselves you would break loudly. Instead, you vanished quietly. And quiet tragedies last longer because there's no sound to warn people they are already standing in ruins. They wanted to be remembered as villains in your story because villains at least matter. What they became instead were footnotes you no longer reread. The tragedy was not that you left. The tragedy was how completely you learned to live without the need to be seen leaving. They tried to provoke reactions with distance, with silence, with sudden warmth and planned cruelty. They were still playing the game long after you stopped recognizing the board. You did not collapse in front of them. You collapsed privately, rebuilt privately, and returned to the world without ever sending invitations to the transformation. And people fear what they didn't witness being formed. They wanted proof that they still owned emotional territory inside you. What they found instead was an eviction they never noticed being filed. Your grief did not become a spectacle. It became architecture. It built walls, structure, boundaries, and quiet rooms where their names were no longer permitted to echo. They wanted drama because drama grants narrative control, but tragedy removes authorship altogether. It does not negotiate meaning, it simply ends what was. They are still trying to understand how the ending arrived without warning them. They don't realize the warning existed for a long time, they just believed they were exempt from consequences. You didn't accuse. You didn't confront. You didn't demand explanations. You just changed your life so thoroughly that their absence became permanent without announcement. They wanted to watch you fall apart so they could measure their power. What dismantled them was realizing they no longer had a measuring system that included you at all. You did not collapse into ruin. You reorganized your world around a version of yourself that no longer required them for definition. They whisper that they don't recognize you anymore, as if recognition were a right they did not forfeit. They mourn the version of you that tolerated things the current version no longer translates. They waited for you to become bitter. You became quieter. They waited for rage. You chose precision. They waited for destruction. You chose departure. That is not drama. That is tragedy. They replay every moment, searching for the exact second where control slipped away from them. They don't understand that it wasn't a moment, it was a process. Erosion never announces the final collapse. You did not explode. You evaporated from the spaces where you were once consumed. They wanted the satisfaction of watching you suffer. What they received instead was the long, slow realization that your suffering no longer included them as an audience. Your silence became its own narrative, not a mystery for them to solve, but a boundary they were never meant to cross again. They imagined the end would leave them powerful. What it left them with was uncertainty. And uncertainty is where people finally meet the consequences of their behavior without protection. They call your transformation cold because it does not center them. They call it cruel because it no longer explains itself to them. But what they really fear is that they are no longer relevant enough to cause damage. They expected your heartbreak to stay suspended around them like gravity. What shocked them was watching it realign around something else entirely, something that did not require their presence to exist. They wanted drama because drama keeps everyone important. You gave them tragedy because tragedy removes importance altogether. They searched for the sound of your collapse like spectators at a delayed explosion. What they got was an empty horizon and the unbearable awareness that the event already happened without them noticing. They thought the story still belonged to them. They did not realize it had ended on a page they were no longer allowed to turn. They wanted to be the reason you fell apart. What they became instead was the reason you learned how to leave without shaking. And that is the most ruthless ending of all. Not to be hated, not to be feared, but to be completely unnecessary to the future that replaced them. They will always struggle with the fact that the ending never gave them the spotlight they craved. No curtain call, no final scene where everyone watches the downfall together. Just a quiet realization that the story slipped out of their hands while they were still rehearsing their lines. They wanted the satisfaction of knowing they mattered in your breaking. What haunts them now is the possibility that they were only a chapter, painful, yes, but ultimately replaceable in the architecture of your becoming. They wanted to be remembered as the storm. What they became was the weather you learned how to survive. The tragedy is not that the relationship ended. The tragedy is that it ended without giving them a role worth remembering. They remained backstage while your life moved into an entirely different production. They still wonder why there was no dramatic farewell, no speech, no confession, no emotional audit of what went wrong. They don't understand that some exits are silent because the damage was never a conversation, it was a pattern. You didn't leave to make them feel small. You left because staying required you to become smaller. That was the choice they never anticipated you would have the courage to make. They thought they would always have time to fix things later. Tragedy has no interest in later. It finishes its work quietly and leaves people holding explanations that arrive too late to matter. Your absence taught them something they were never willing to learn while you were present, that access to someone's heart is not a permanent entitlement. It is a privilege with an expiration date. They tried to reduce your ending to a misunderstanding, a phase, a temporary reaction. But time has a way of confirming what silence already decided. You were never coming back. They still listen for your name in rooms that no longer deserve it. They still flinch at memories that once gave them comfort. They still carry your shadow into moments where you are no longer required. You became the unanswered question in their narrative, the one conclusion they don't control, the one ending that does not bend to revision. They wanted your collapse to validate their importance. What they received instead was a future that moved forward without consulting their past. You didn't walk away as an act of punishment. You walked away as an act of alignment with your sanity, with your worth, with the version of your life that no longer needed suffering to feel meaningful. And that is why this ending hurts differently. There is no villain they can comfortably blame anymore. No dramatic confrontation to relive. No scene to replay where they look powerful. Only the slow, unbearable awareness that they were outgrown. They wanted drama because drama keeps old bonds alive through conflict. You gave them tragedy because tragedy severs bonds so completely that even conflict becomes irrelevant. In the end, they were not defeated by your anger. They were defeated by your peace. They were not undone by your revenge. They were undone by your release. They wanted noise. They wanted fire. They wanted spectacle. What they got was something far worse for their ego, a quiet ending that proved they no longer mattered in the life that replaced them. And that is the final shape of the tragedy. Not that the heart broke, but that it healed in a direction that never pointed back. They thought life was a simple cycle: leave, break, betray, return, apologize, and everything resets. But you weren't built to repeat history. You learned, you evolved, and by the time they realized what they lost, you were already rewriting the narrative in ink darker than their intentions. They came back when the storm they created finally cornered them. Suddenly, the villain they painted on the wall looked like the hero they needed. But you weren't interested in being needed anymore. You remembered what it felt like to be disposable, and you decided never to feel that again. They wanted reconciliation because they assumed you were still the same soft-hearted fool who would melt at the sound of their voice. But time and wounds forged steel, and now your silence carried more weight than their apologies ever could. They expected a warm return, not a frigid stare. They expected a conversation, not the solid brick wall of "I've moved on." They wanted you back, but they didn't understand that the version they abandoned didn't exist anymore. You didn't return to the battlefield for peace. You came back with armor, scars, and a memory sharpened into a blade. Not to negotiate, not to rebuild, but to make sure they never forgot the lesson you learned the hard way. They couldn't wrap their minds around why your eyes didn't soften, why your voice didn't tremble, why your heart didn't open. They assumed revenge was screaming, fighting, exposing, destroying. They never expected revenge to be simply outgrowing them. You didn't need explosions, dramatic confrontations, or venom-spitting speeches. All you needed was success, healing, growth, silence. Those were the daggers that cut deeper than any insult you could have thrown. They mistook your absence for weakness, never realizing you were building something far greater while they were busy trying to replace you. And when the truth hit, it hit like a freight train. They could never reach you again. They returned expecting the same door to be open. Instead, they found a fortress. A version of you that didn't beg, didn't plead, didn't break. A version of you they accidentally created when they miscalculated their cruelty. Once upon a time, you chased clarity, ran after explanations, begged for the truth. Now, you didn't care. Closure wasn't necessary anymore because the wounds taught you everything their words never could. They thought coming back was the triumph. They thought you'd be honored, relieved, grateful. But the real victory was standing there, looking at them, and realizing your peace no longer depended on their presence. Revenge wasn't about hurting them. Revenge was watching them deal with the realization that their absence damaged them far more than it damaged you. That's the kind of pain no retaliation can match. They wanted validation, forgiveness, emotional payout. Instead, they got a calmness they never expected. Because once you outgrow someone, the connection dissolves and nothing they do can earn their way back in. They expected regret sitting on your shoulders. Instead, you showed them a posture stronger, steadier, untouchable. Strength was the new language you spoke, and they were illiterate in it. You remembered the nights you barely breathed. They remembered none of it. They expected a reunion, but you remembered the pain, the betrayal, the broken promises. And that memory kept you grounded while they tried to drag you into déjà vu. You weren't the same. And that terrified them more than anything, because they realized the monster they crafted wasn't a villain, it was someone they could no longer manipulate, guilt trip, or command. At first they believed your distance was an act, that you were just wounded and waiting to be lured back. But eventually they realized that the cliff wasn't emotional, it was final. They could scream from the other side forever and still never get a response. They didn't fear losing you when they walked away. They feared losing the version of you that cared, and that version died the day you finally chose self-respect over their chaos. Revenge wasn't plotting their failure, it was building a life where their absence was an upgrade, and once you reached that level, even their return felt like a downgrade. They ran back, hoping to press resume. But you had already pressed delete. And there's nothing more terrifying to someone who once had power than realizing their control expired. You didn't slam doors. You outgrew hallways. You didn't destroy them. You simply stopped giving them access. And that was the kind of revenge they were never prepared to face. They stopped laughing when they realized the joke ended up on them. They gambled with someone who wasn't afraid to lose. They thought your heart was the weakness, but it became the weapon. They hated that you didn't try to fix things, that you didn't fight, that you didn't come back. Because your lack of reaction proved a truth they weren't ready to accept. They mattered more to themselves than they ever mattered to you. And when the dust settled, when their apologies echoed unanswered, they finally realized why your revenge worked so well. It didn't destroy them, it made them live with the fact that losing you was their own doing. You won not by breaking them, but by becoming the version of yourself that didn't need them anymore. And nothing burns deeper than standing in front of someone who once thought you'd collapse without them, and proving you never needed them at all. They started realizing the gravity of their mistake when you didn't blink, didn't flinch, didn't ask why. The silence they always weaponized was finally used against them, and this time, they were the ones drowning in unanswered questions. The irony was delicious. The person who once begged now walked away without saying a word. They never understood that love changes, hardens, evolves. They never imagined that the same heart that once cared enough to bleed could also cauterize the wound and keep walking. They built a monster and expected it to stay obedient, but monsters with memories are the hardest ones to leash. Once upon a time, you would have listened to their excuses, their reasons, their carefully packaged apologies. But experience becomes armor, and you learn something priceless. Closure isn't something given, it's something taken. And once you took yours, they had nothing left to offer. They underestimated how much strength a broken spirit could develop. They underestimated how much wisdom betrayal could teach. They underestimated how much transformation pain could force. And by the time they recognized the new version of you, the evolution was complete. What scared them wasn't your coldness, it was your stability, your calm, your peace. Because they were so used to chaos that they imagined you needed them to stay balanced. Seeing you balanced without them shattered their pride far more than any revenge ever could. You walked past them with a smile that wasn't forced, with eyes that showed no hesitation, with shoulders that carried no emotional debt. That image haunted them, because it proved one thing: they overestimated their importance in your story. They returned expecting vulnerability. Instead, they found someone who had outgrown the chapter entirely. You weren't revisiting old wounds, you were too busy writing new victories. And that reality cut deeper than all the tears you could have shed. They thought your silence was cruelty, but silence was mercy. Because speaking would have revealed just how little you thought of the situation anymore. Silence was the final nail in the coffin, a gesture that said, "You're not worth the sentence." Every step you took forward without them reminded them that their loss wasn't temporary. They tried to convince themselves you were just in a phase, that sooner or later you would snap back. But every passing day proved the opposite. You were gone for good. The greatest punishment was watching you become everything they tried to convince you you weren't. Strong, valuable, desired, respected. Their betrayal became the fire, and you turned the ashes into bricks for the foundation of a better future. They came back expecting to negotiate, but revenge was never about bargaining. It was the quiet decision that their access ended, their role expired, their chapter closed. They expected you to leave a door cracked open, but you built a new house in a new city and never gave them the address. They were terrified not because you changed, but because you didn't need them to change. Growth happened without their guidance, their apology, or their permission. And nothing bruises an ego like being replaced by self-worth. You knew they wanted redemption only because they feared consequences. They didn't want to make things right, they just wanted to escape accountability. And once you learned to distinguish genuine remorse from fear of losing control, their words lost all value. They thought rejection would break you, but surviving it only made you lethal. Not in anger, not in rage, but in the simple fact that you no longer played their game. And when you stopped playing, they lost all their power. The truth that kept them awake at night was this: they didn't lose you because they made a mistake. They lost you because they thought they could make one and still get you back. And realizing that you weren't waiting for them anymore, that was the real revenge. Their ego didn't just crack, it collapsed the moment they realized the truth. You were never desperate for them. Not then, not now, not ever. They built their confidence on the illusion that you needed their presence to breathe, and when that illusion died, so did the version of themselves they felt safe inside. They always assumed your silence meant longing, your patience meant hope, your kindness meant attachment. They never considered that you were quiet because you were already detached, already observing them from a distance they were too self-absorbed to notice. Their ego fed off the fantasy that you'd chase them, that you'd break first, that you'd crumble the moment they withdrew their attention. Instead, you stood there unfazed, untouched, unmoved, and that's when the cracks in their pride became fractures. They thought they were irreplaceable, a rare treasure you were lucky to have. But the moment they realized you weren't begging, weren't pleading, weren't even thinking about running after them, they felt something unfamiliar: weakness. You didn't give them a scene. You didn't break down. You didn't demand answers. You simply stopped caring. And that was a level of power they weren't built to handle. Your indifference became the storm that tore their persona apart. Their ego had been inflated by every person who treated them as a prize, and they expected you to respond the same way. But you didn't. You walked away like someone closing a book they'd already memorized, and the silence that followed stabbed deeper than any words could. It wasn't heartbreak that scared them, it was your stability. It was your ability to breathe without their validation, to sleep without their presence, to rise without their support. Every part of them screamed for attention, and you didn't even glance back. They couldn't understand how you moved on so smoothly, how you smiled without hesitation, how your eyes never dimmed, how your energy didn't collapse but actually grew sharper, colder, stronger. They expected a ruin, but witnessed a rebirth instead. Their ego scraped the floor when they saw you thriving, when they realized that losing you wasn't a tragedy for you, but a liberation. You were lighter without them, freer without their chaos, clearer without their noise. You didn't create a rivalry, you didn't compete, you didn't seek revenge. You simply healed quietly, powerfully. And nothing destroys someone more than watching the person they tried to break glow in a way they never could. What crushed them wasn't your distance, it was your lack of reaction. They expected tears, but you gave them composure. They expected confusion, but you gave them clarity. They expected fear, but you gave them a calm so steady it felt like an insult. Your confidence became the dagger they never saw coming. Not the loud, boastful kind, but the soft, dangerous kind that comes from knowing your worth isn't tied to anyone's presence. They realized they could leave, stay, return, disappear, and none of it would shake you. They spent so long believing they were the highlight of your story, but you treated them like a chapter important at the time, yes, but not unforgettable. The moment they saw that, their pride fell apart like glass under a hammer. You didn't need closure from them. You didn't need apologies. You didn't need explanations. That terrified them, because people who are desperate cling to loose ends. But you burned the whole rope and kept walking. Their ego wasn't ready for someone who loved without dependence, who cared without obsession, who could walk away without collapsing. They weren't used to strength like that. They weren't accustomed to losing control so effortlessly. The truth struck them harder than any fight ever could. You were only ever loyal, never trapped, only ever present, never dependent, only ever giving, never sacrificing yourself. And the moment you stopped giving, everything they took for granted disappeared. They thought you were naive, but you were simply patient. They thought you were attached, but you were simply kind. They thought you were weak, but you were simply considerate. Once those layers fell, all they saw was someone they couldn't manipulate. Their ego screamed when they saw your happiness didn't shrink without them, it expanded. You didn't dim. You didn't stumble. You didn't go quiet. You lit up, and that light exposed how small they were in the grand scheme of your life. They always thought they were the exception, the one person you'd break your rules for, the one soul you'd cling to. But you showed them something dangerous. Nobody gets that privilege unless they deserve it. And they didn't. Your silence toward them turned into indifference, and your indifference turned into peace. Watching you evolve without their influence fractured the illusion they hid behind the belief that you needed them to feel complete. They begged for reactions, even if they were negative. They wanted emotion, conflict, chaos, anything that proved they still mattered. But you offered none. You starved their ego, and it withered like something dying without oxygen. Every attempt they made to provoke you fell flat. You didn't rise to the bait. You didn't lower yourself to their level. You didn't even acknowledge their little games. And that lack of control made them unravel more and more. Your energy shifted. You became unbothered, detached, almost unreachable. And instead of feeling triumphant, they felt irrelevant. You didn't treat them poorly. You treated them like they no longer existed, and that was far worse. Their ego shattered when they realized something they never expected. You didn't hate them. You didn't love them. You simply didn't care anymore. And indifference is the sharpest blade a person can ever face. They used to take pride in the idea that you'd never find another them. But the real wound came when they saw how easily you could forget them, how your world didn't pause, how your heart didn't collapse. What destroyed them was knowing they weren't necessary to your happiness. They weren't the source of your strength. They weren't the center of your universe. They were a moment, not a milestone. A lesson, not a legacy. And when the truth finally settled into their bones, they felt something they'd never experienced before. Smallness, powerless, insignificant. All because you showed them the one thing their ego couldn't survive. They needed you. You never needed them. What truly broke them was understanding that your detachment wasn't an act, it was evolution. You weren't pretending to be fine. You were genuinely better without them. Lighter without their weight. Stronger without their chaos. And that reality squeezed their ego until it cracked like porcelain. They kept telling themselves you'd eventually miss them, that life would force you to remember their importance. But life didn't. Days passed, weeks passed, and you didn't stumble, didn't falter, didn't go searching. Your silence became a mirror, showing them exactly how replaceable they were. They replayed old memories like a movie, desperately trying to spot the moment you stopped needing them. But they never understood that independence wasn't something you gained after them, it was something you always had. You simply stopped hiding it to make them comfortable. Your growth exposed their stagnation. While you matured emotionally, mentally, spiritually, they stayed stuck in circles, repeating the same patterns, expecting the same reactions. And when you refused to participate in their loops, they mistook it for cruelty, but it was simply maturity. You no longer gave them the attention their ego demanded. You stopped responding with passion, stopped defending yourself, stopped explaining. You placed your peace above their pride, and that alone felt like betrayal to someone who relied on your validation to feel whole. The more you thrived, the more their resentment grew. They couldn't wrap their mind around the fact that someone they thought they controlled was suddenly beyond their reach. It felt like losing a battle they didn't even know was happening. They once believed they could return any time, that your heart was a revolving door made just for them. But when they approached again and found that door locked sealed shut, they realized just how severe the consequences of underestimating you truly were. Your progress created a silence that suffocated them. They couldn't brag about you. They couldn't access you. They couldn't predict you. They couldn't influence you. You became a version of yourself they could no longer interpret, and nothing bruises an ego deeper than being shut out of a story they thought they controlled. They watched from afar as you shifted from someone who cared deeply to someone who chooses carefully. As someone who once offered softness now carried a quiet, calculated strength that came from lessons they taught you through pain. Every time they tried to convince themselves you still cared, they ran into the same truth. You were not waiting. You weren't hoping. You weren't hurting. You were expanding. And expansion is the loudest kind of goodbye. They tried to convince themselves that you were the one who lost something valuable. But every aspect of your life contradicted that lie. Your glow-up made their ego crumble. Your confidence dismantled their delusions. Your happiness rewrote the ending they expected. They never imagined the day you'd look at them with neutrality instead of affection. And that neutrality? It became their punishment. Because nothing hurts a self-centered person more than realizing they don't matter anymore, not even as an enemy. They thought they were strategic. They thought they were 10 steps ahead. They thought they were smart enough to manipulate you, twist you, and use you like some disposable pawn in their little ego-driven game. What they didn't know was that you saw every move coming before they even made it. They thought they were playing you, but the whole time, you were reading them like an open book. They tried to provoke you, thinking you'd react, thinking you'd fall apart, thinking you'd break down exactly how they expected. But when you stayed calm, stayed sharp, stayed unshaken, they didn't know what to do. It terrified them because you weren't reacting, not because you were weak, but because you already knew where their game would end. They wanted to confuse you, to make you question yourself, to make you doubt your reality. But instead, you watched them expose their own character without lifting a single finger. The funny thing is, you didn't even have to play them. Their own intentions betrayed them so loudly they practically played themselves. They thought they were using you for attention, validation, affection, whatever they needed to feed their ego. But in the end, all they did was reveal how predictable they were. You didn't fall for their act. You let it run long enough to understand exactly who you were dealing with. And once you understood, it was over for them. They're mad now because they swear you outsmarted them. But the truth is, you never stooped to manipulation. You just stopped participating. And nothing frustrates a manipulator more than losing control to someone who simply stopped giving them access. When they set the trap, they expected you to walk right in. What they didn't expect was that you saw the trap, walked around it, and let them fall into it themselves. The silence, the distance, the calm composure, that's what destroyed them, because it made them realize you were 10 times smarter than the version of you they built in their head. Now they're replaying everything, trying to figure out where they miscalculated. They thought you were naive. They thought you were blind. They thought you couldn't possibly see through their inconsistent actions. But you were watching, analyzing, learning, storing every detail for the moment you finally decided to let them drown in their own consequences. They hate that you didn't confront them. They hate that you didn't cry or argue. They hate that you didn't give them the dramatic scene they were hoping for. Because that means you knew exactly what they were doing and you simply refused to let it touch you. The real reason they're mad is because you beat them at a game they created. You mastered a battlefield you never even wanted to fight on. And you did it with elegance, silence, and an unshakable sense of self-worth. That's what stings the most. They underestimated you. And now they're paying the price. They can't stand that you stayed emotionally grounded while they were busy acting, lying, and pretending. They were performing. You were observing. They were plotting. You were preparing. They were playing. You were winning. It drives them insane knowing you predicted their patterns before they even showed them. That's why they're angry now, because they thought they could blind you with charm or guilt, but you saw the red flags the moment they walked into your life pretending to care. When you finally walked away, you didn't need to explain anything. You didn't need closure. You didn't need validation. You simply walked, and the door closed on them like a final chapter they never wanted to end. That's when they realized the whole time they thought they were manipulating you, you were quietly building your exit. The silence you left behind exposed everything about them, every inconsistency, every lie, every hidden intention. And now they're scrambling to rewrite the story so they don't look like the villain. But the truth is written in their own actions, and your calm detachment only highlights it more. They thought they'd leave you hurt, broken, confused. Instead, you left them humiliated, powerless, and angry at themselves. Because losing you wasn't part of their script. They planned the game, but they couldn't handle the ending. Their ego can't accept that they never had the upper hand. They can't accept that you were already emotionally ahead of them. They can't accept that you were the one in control the whole time, simply choosing silence over chaos. They're furious because they swear you manipulated them, but what they call manipulation is actually your strength, your intuition, your ability to understand intentions without being told. They didn't get played, you just stopped allowing them to play you. The more distance you created, the more they realized just how little power they actually had. That's the part that cuts them the most. Not losing you, but realizing they never really had you to begin with. Your presence was a privilege they mishandled. Now they want to blame you for everything, for walking away, for not fighting, for being too calm, too composed, too unbothered. But deep down they know they're only angry because they played themselves trying to play you. They're embarrassed by how predictable they acted. They're offended you didn't fall into their emotional traps. They're insulted that you denied them the chaos they thrive on. When they wanted control, you gave them indifference. Nothing burns them more than that. Their pride is shattered because you turned out to be exactly what they feared, someone who cannot be manipulated, broken, or controlled, someone who sees through the mask, someone who doesn't chase. When you walked away, they lost their ability to control the narrative. Now they're stuck with the truth. They weren't the mastermind, they were the clown juggling their own insecurities while thinking they were fooling you. What they hate more than losing you is realizing you were always 10 steps ahead. They hate that you protected yourself quietly. They hate that you didn't fall apart. They hate that you didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing you hurt. And the reason they're furious now? Because in trying to break you, they broke their own illusion. They wanted to play you. And instead, they exposed themselves completely. Your strength, your silence, your intuition, those were your weapons. You didn't fight their way. You didn't manipulate back. You simply let them collapse under the weight of their own behavior. And that is what truly played them. Now they sit with the realization. The game ended the moment you understood your worth. And from that moment on, every move they made only pushed them deeper into a loss they orchestrated themselves. They're furious because they finally understand that you didn't outplay them with tricks or manipulation, you outplayed them with clarity. You saw through the fog they created, and instead of stumbling, you stepped back and let them drown in it. That's what terrifies them. The realization that they were the only ones confused in a game they designed. They keep asking themselves how you walked away so effortlessly, how you cut the cord without trembling, how you moved on without panic or hesitation. They wanted you emotionally tangled, emotionally trapped. But when the moment came, you chose peace so smoothly it looked rehearsed. They never expected that. They thought you were too attached, too soft, too trusting. They were wrong. Every day now they replay the moments where they thought they had the upper hand. They cringe at their own arrogance. They hate the memory of you staying calm while they were busy plotting. They hate that your silence back then wasn't weakness, it was strategy. It was foresight. It was the quiet rise of someone who knew exactly how the story would end. They wanted you to chase, to beg, to question yourself, but instead you leveled up. You evolved. You became someone they can't predict, can't influence, can't control. That transformation alone is enough to shatter everything they believed about themselves. Because if they couldn't break someone they assumed was easy to break, what does that say about their power? Now they blame you for being cold, heartless, changed. But deep down they know they created that version of you. They sculpted your evolution through their disrespect. They pushed you into your strength. They forced you to awaken the part of you that refuses to accept crumbs. And now that this upgraded version stands before them, they're terrified. Their anger now is really grief over losing the version of you they could take advantage of. Grief over losing their influence. Grief over realizing you outgrew the battlefield they tried to trap you in. They're grieving, and their ego won't let them admit it, so instead they act mad. But you can see the truth behind their bitterness. They try to convince themselves they didn't care, but their constant obsession, their constant analyzing, their constant need to rewrite the story proves otherwise. They can't let it go because they can't accept that you saw everything, stayed silent, and still came out on top. They can't accept that their plan burned down in their own hands.